I'll call the meeting to order, and please join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Go ahead and call the roll.
Trustee Spurling.
Here.
Trustee Lee.
Yay.
Trustee Hines.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
And we're all here this evening. Move on to public comment. At first, we have the public comments. 2-minute opportunity. Any member of the public that's here this evening that wishes to address the board, now is your time. Seeing no one jumping up there, we'll go ahead and move on to the public hearing that we're having this evening, which is item B, public hearing on the boundary agreement with Oswego. And unless staff had anything introductory to go on this, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And if there's any member of the public that wishes to address the board tonight on the update of our boundary agreement with the Village of Oswego, now would be your opportunity. All right, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll move on to item C for public participation, which is the Clark mosquito control. And with that, I'll ask Engineer Wallers for a summary of this.
Thank you, Mayor. Following the last meeting, Village Board asked for a representative from Clark to come back to explain the item in the proposal, which was the ground dispensed mosquito repellent, or I guess mosquito spray. So Jack Danish is here from Clark to give that presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, for inviting me here this evening. I'm Jack Thenish with Clark Mosquito Control. We're a Illinois-based Illinois company here. Actually, recently moved our headquarters to St. Charles, Illinois. We have our operational headquarters, vehicle and equipment and manufacturing, is in Schaumburg, Illinois, as well as Roselle, Illinois. We're the largest mosquito control contractor in the world, and we consider ourselves experts at it. We manufacture products and distribute them on a global basis. I do have a short, brief, very brief, under 5-minute video here that I'd like to, that I think answers a lot of questions in and of itself, and then I'd like to open it up for questions and after that. So if that's okay with the board, that'd be.
Yeah.
The following is an overview of the community's environmental mosquito management program provided by Clark. This program utilizes an integrated mosquito management approach that delivers effective, economical solutions while balancing environmental responsibility. Integrated mosquito management has 5 key components: public education, survey and mapping of the community, surveillance and monitoring of the mosquito population, and implementing larval control and adult control when necessary. Public education is an important component of an integrated mosquito management program. Your community offers a number of resources available for you, including links to websites providing basic information on mosquito control and literature on how to protect yourself from mosquito-borne diseases, as well as reducing mosquito breeding on your property. The foundation of this program is to conduct a thorough survey and mapping of the community. This is important because it allows us to identify potential mosquito breeding habitats, chart them, and produce operational plans and maps. Surveillance is essential to an integrated mosquito management program. Surveillance includes the monitoring of both larval and adult mosquito populations. Mosquito habitats and potential breeding areas are inspected on a regular basis. Adult mosquitoes are monitored through a series of traps that identify the density and distribution of the overall population of mosquitoes and monitors for mosquito-borne diseases such as West Nile virus. All larval and adult collections are returned to the Clark Laboratory for identification. This information enables us to take quick and necessary actions to control populations. Surveillance data is important because it helps direct both our larval and adult mosquito control activities. A A critical part of an integrated mosquito management control program is larval control. Larval control is treating potential breeding habitats to prevent mosquitoes from developing and becoming biting adults. These breeding sites may include retention ponds, drainage ditches, wetlands, low-lying areas that hold water, and catch basins. Residents can help larval control efforts by cleaning out bird baths, eliminating standing water around their house, fixing leaky faucets, and keeping gutters clean. Adult mosquito control is another important element of an integrated mosquito management program. These measures are implemented only when the surveillance of adult mosquito populations justify control efforts. Adult mosquito control is performed by ultra-low volume applications. All public health products used in your program have been approved and registered by the U.S. EPA following the review of many scientific studies. The EPA has assessed these chemicals and found that, when used according to label directions, they do not pose unreasonable risk to public health and the environment. You may see a truck driving through your neighborhood following a designated route for the purpose of controlling adult mosquitoes. If you would like to be notified prior to a mosquito control application or to report potential mosquito breeding areas such as standing water or stagnant, unkempt swimming pools, you can call Clark's Mosquito Hotline at 800-942-2555. Your community's mosquito control program has been planned to deliver effective, economical, and environmentally responsible control measures for improving public health and quality of life.
It was very, obviously, a brief overview of the program, but I'd like to really answer any questions the board may have this evening.
I got some. You know, your drivers, this has happened quite a few years. I used to ride with them once in a while. They go too fast, and by going fast, you're not getting all those mosquitoes. And sometimes I think they drive 30, 35 miles an hour. That's too dang fast. You got to slow down when you're going through them neighborhoods.
We, the machine, in roughly the last 5 years, underwent a transformation. It's called a smart flow technology, where there has a radar system that reads the speed of the road, and it pumps out the right amount of insecticide. So it's called electronic linear flow, and as long as there's spray coming out the back, they can move up to 20 miles an hour now, and I think that's what 5-6 years ago it was 10 miles an hour.
I
Okay,
hate to disagree with you, but that's not true. I know, I rode with them.
the Ledger wrote about how 40 years ago, they put an article in where Oswego said, do not follow behind a fog truck for mosquitoes, the kids on the bicycles. And I was the one that brought up, they went down my street last year going 40. A kid on a bicycle, you'd have to have a motorcycle to keep up with them. And then they went down River Street. I thought, well, maybe it's just my street. He went too fast. He went down River Street going just as fast. Now, the little bit of fog, it's not that big fog it used to be. The little bit of fog, it was a big windy day, and it was just blowing. You couldn't even see where it went to. And I questioned Mike Pubis at that time, and he said, well, they're supposed to be driving slower. I said, I don't care. They were driving at least 40, and it was a kid in a white truck, not as nice as the one you just showed, and he just sprinted down one street and down the other. I said, and we don't get to pick the night, or the, say, approximate time. If you call and say, well, we're going to do it like you wouldn't want to do it tonight, say, where the wind's blowing. And that's the night this guy picked last year to do our end of town, and which is down the South Main. And he picked the night where the wind was blowing hard, and he was like in a hurry. I don't know what his problem was, but so I know there's no governor on his truck because he was going a lot faster than 30 miles an hour. So all I want is something to where you call our public works and say, we're going to do it in this area, and you let us know if it's windy in that area, we won't do it tonight. And then the guy won't come from St. Charles or whatever.
The wind speed has to be below 15 miles an hour and
Yeah.
temperatures above 55, so.
Well, the temperature was above 55, but the wind speed was a lot higher than that night. And the guy was just driving way too fast. I mean, so residents right away, did he go down your street that fast? Yeah, he did. Well, he went down mine too. I know. What can you say to him then?
Yeah,
That's
I
the-
can't put on there to, you know, to not go over 12, 14 miles an hour, and we can certainly do that. In addition to that, Smart Flow Tech, we also have GPS tracking on every vehicle, and I brought some copies of those maps. So we can see in real time how fast they're going, and they are,
Right.
you know, we can, this is actually data from last year. So we have that data indefinitely, and it tells us how fast the vehicle is going. So I brought some copies of that, too. So
I can see one driver maybe doing it in this
We'll have
end,
people watching 'em.
but in other towns and other areas of our town, I would think that the driver, I hope it ain't the same guy, basically.
Certainly, and we can, by all means, call that 800 number, and we can track that information and see, you know, and see what was happening.
Okay.
But absolutely, there's things I can do operationally to say, well, while in the village of Montgomery, do not exceed 14 miles an hour.
That's the only one that I had questions with. Throwing them in the drain tanks, fine. 4 or 5 years ago, we had a trustee that say, maybe a new company would start up. And I said, what, a guy with 2 cans of off? I said, these guys are the best. They get the most towns around here. But in most cases, you don't have a driver like that. And if nobody's, and we can't afford to have somebody ride with you. And it's just, you know, it's complaints, so.
The fog that comes out of the back of those trucks, how long is it effective for?
It's an immediate kill of what's in the air at that time. Now, if we don't take anything else from tonight's presentation, the mosquito development is, they go through 4 stages in their life cycle, from an egg stage, which is microscopic, to a larval stage. Then they move into a 3rd stage of their life as a pupal stage, and they do a metamorphosis much like a caterpillar to a butterfly, and they hatch off as, in the 4th stage as an adult mosquito, and this is what 99.9% of the population thinks of as an adult flying mosquito. But they have to have that aquatic stage to reach that adult stage. The perfect environment for any insect is a tropical environment, and that's defined by 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 80% relative humidity. In a 24/7, a tropical environment, a mosquito will go from egg to adult in 4 days of a constant 80. In the Midwest, with our overnight lows dropping down, we're roughly a 10 to 14 day life cycle. So what we're doing is immediate knockdown of killing of what's in the air, that adult mosquito, and it's 10 to 14 days until the next hatch of that life of the mosquito. So this is a biological process. There's no silver bullet. Just like you couldn't mow your lawn, we get the sun and the rain and the grass is growing. Well, the same thing's happening to the mosquito population.
Okay.
And we do everything we can is with the tap to the standing water to try and kill them before they hatch off. When we get into a month like May here where we had, 2-3 inches above average, every roadside ditch, every, rowboat left upright, every canoe, simply turn it over, pickup truck with the holes, drain holes plugged. That all breeds, that's all becomes a mosquito breeding ground. From a horse hoof into the soil. They're really an amazing insect, to a clogged gutter. So there's a lot of things homeowners can do as well. Simply turn over the bird bath or, a dog bowl, rinse it out. That can breed thousands of mosquitoes. So
Okay.
their life cycle is 10 to 14 days in the Midwest here. We do get into an 80 in July and August where it's a rapid life cycle.
There were 3 comments I had, if I may. First of all, I would like to get the 800 number again.
Certainly. It's 1-800-942-2555.
2555.
And any resident interested in being notified prior to the treatment can call that, and just the prompts to be placed on the resident notification list. And they'll have to say for the Village of Montgomery and leave their phone number, and we'll actually directly call them. We call them this is temperature and wind speed dependent, so we call them that evening, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, and then we'll be out that night.
The second comment, if our staff is agreeable and has time, it might be useful to do a webpage offering some of the education and training that you've commented on, and maybe some links to other material that you may have.
Absolutely.
The more we could prevent them, the ounce of prevention is certainly cheaper than a pound of cure. And I live on the west side. I've never received a complaint about the speed of the drivers or the service in any way, nor have I observed it. So it may not be a consistent or I just wanted to give you some positive feedback too. I've never gotten a complaint. I have people say, where are they? When are they coming? But not, wow, did they go by fast? So it's an appreciated service. The public values it.
There really is a whole host of Illinois Department of Public Health that we can link to. We have some, I brought with me tonight, and I'll be more than happy to leave it with the clerk. There's a pamphlet, homeowners pamphlet. We used to call it Stop Raising Mosquitoes in Your Yard, but today it's Together We Can Control Mosquitoes in Our Community. And there's a list there of steps homeowners can take to not actually breed them in their yards.
Please leave that. Let's see if staff feels they can work it in.
One other question. I know one of the concerns was about the spraying, on the contract, and the effectiveness of that. But the main one for me was, when you do come out, do you notify, like, if we called in, could you notify our staff and we could post that on Facebook that you guys might be in town tonight?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I had, each treatment is, I call Mike. Last year we called
Yeah.
Mike and got approval of the treatment.
And
So
I think we did post it last year. I kind of
maybe
recall
towards
seeing
the end, he
something.
was doing, towards the end of last year, I think we were doing that.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's one of these where can we just pick, Thursday of next week, but we just don't know what the weather's going to be for Thursday of next week.
Right. We understand that. Any other questions?
I just need a little bit of clarification. When they come out and do the spraying, at least what I have noticed, it's typically overnight.
Correct.
It's like in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And then it's typically not until later summer, as you were mentioning, when we get that 80. It's usually like August when we start to have the trucks come out, correct?
Well, really, the season's roughly May 15th to September 15th, so it's really what we play the hand Mother Nature deals us. So
Okay.
right now, what we just saw in May, our overnight lows were dropping down. And we had a cool spring last year as well with, Lake Michigan freezing and that. And it seems like we're getting into a more of a summer pattern right now. So really in the next 2 weeks, we could, possibly do the first treatment because we're anticipating a very high mosquito annoyance here in the next 2 to 3 weeks with our mid-80s. And this is a direct result. 10 to 14 days after an inch of rain, we will see adult mosquitoes if we get into that 80s during the day and a little warmer at night. So
Okay. And the other thing I would mention, trustee Bond had said he lives on the west side. He hadn't received complaints. I live on the east side, but I did get a complaint from the west side saying that they had a truck going through fast. They perceived it to be going rather fast, so.
I'm more than happy to address that in big bold on each of the digital maps that do not exceed, the low end of the labeled rate is, 12 to 14 miles an hour.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that.
And the reason it's done at night is the wind speeds are calm and the mosquitoes are nocturnal. They feed at night. So, again, it's when they're active. So, they're in the highest concentration. They're what we call on the wing. And could leave you with some other tip. Only the female mosquito bites you, and that's not. It's the protein in our red blood or any higher form of mammalian life, whether it be a cat, squirrel, dog, deer. That protein fertilizes her eggs, so that's how we get more mosquitoes. So the sense of smell is how they find us, and that's when we exhale carbon dioxide, and that's what attracts them to you. And that's the theory behind off. It's strictly a repellent. It doesn't kill them. It just repels. Their sense of smell is very strong. The Kane County Department of Public Health is doing what we call gravid traps. These are actually trying to catch mosquitoes that would be laying their eggs and after they bit a cat, squirrel, dog, or a bird is the biggest. The Viremia, the West Nile virus, lives in migratory birds. The mosquito bites the migratory bird, and the virus lives in her salivary gland. And you're just like so many other things in life, in the wrong place at the wrong time to get bit by that mosquito that bit the very rare, of an infected bird. So that is done under a grant to the Kane County Health Department, and they're doing testing for this live mosquitoes for the virus, and we do about 60 of those throughout northern Illinois as well, and that's another trigger for an adult mosquito, for a truck application, is when we have a positive sample in the Fox Valley here. So that's another trigger. It is logarithmic. Now, the migratory birds come back into the environment here in spring and in summer, and the mosquito has to bite the bird, so then she has offspring that are also infected, so we have a higher percent of infected mosquitoes as we get into August and September. So, people can be conscious of that.
I have a question. The sprays you can buy for your lawn, and there's a multitude of companies that make them, are they effective?
They are that's product is the one that connects to your garden hose. It's called permethrin. It's the same active ingredient that's in a dog flea and tick collar, and that is kind of working off that repel. It dries onto the foliage. Their food is plant nectar. The blood is not their food. So their food's plant nectar. You can do you're at a picnic or a baseball, and the baseball rolls into the woods, and you say, my gosh, there's all the mosquitoes. So they harbor in that heavily foliated area at sunset. They're also about 86% water, so the sun actually dries them out, so they need that shade. And you spray this onto your green foliage, broadleaf plants, and when they go to feed on that plant nectar, this permethrin, they ingest it and it kills them. It's also, again, an odor that keeps them out of your yard. It's if you read it, it's a very low percentage, 1%, 0.5% of permethrin, but
It works.
it works.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for coming tonight. You're most informative. That's what we
Thank you for
wanted.
inviting me. I
We
apologize for the,
appreciate that. No, we appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Jack, appreciate it.
have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, move on. I'll read the consent agenda and then entertain a motion for approval. We have the minutes of the village board meeting of May 26th, executive session minutes of May 26th, accounts payable through June 4th, 2015, the building report for May of 2015, cancellation of the committee of the whole meeting for June 16th, the carnival permit for Big H, and then ordinance 1671, which is regulating wages of the village. This is a waiver of first, passage on the second.
That's the prevailing wage that we have to pass every year. It's just a state statute. It has nothing to do with employee wages.
So move.
Second?
Moved in second, call the roll, please.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yay.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
That carries 6-0. Thank you. Moving into items for separate action, we have the first item, recommendation of the Plan Commission of PC 2015-006, SUFP, special use and final plat for a multi-tenant building with a drive-through and outdoor cafe. And with that, I would ask Director Young for a summary of this.
Thank you, President Brawley. Last week, the Plan Commission made a recommendation to approve a special use and final plat for Inland at a second site. You might recall that last fall, there was a site that came forward with a 4-unit building. This is a 5-unit building that'll be on the other side or the east side of the Sam's gas station. So what's required is a special use for the drive-through and the cafe, that it will be occupied one of the end cap units within the 5-unit building. The site is 3 acres. A total of 7,800 square feet will be enclosed in this new building. As I mentioned, 5 units, 3 will have national tenants that have already signed leases. So Inland intends to get under construction with this project later this summer or early this fall, and get occupancy as soon as possible thereafter. So again, this is just the first reading. Well, you'll have the first reading as your next item on the agenda, and a recommendation to approve by the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Rich. Is there any comment on Plan Commission's recommendation?
I'm just glad to see 5 of the 7 are filled. And I'll make a motion for the recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Second.
Moved in second, call the roll, please.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yay.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
That carries 6-0. Then we'll move into the first reading of the ordinance, 1672, which is approving that special use for a drive-through and outdoor cafe. And unless you have anything else to add, we will not take action on this today, but we will at our next village board meeting. Is there any comment on that? All right, you'll see that on the, anybody opposed to putting that on consent at the next meeting, if there's no comments tonight? You
No,
can
that's-
certainly pull that off if you don't.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have ordinance 1670, increasing the number of Class M liquor licenses. This is for Murphy Oil, and this is a waiver of first and passage on the second reading. And with that, I would turn it over to Chief Myers for a summary.
Thank you very much. In your packet tonight is the request from Murphy Oil. They're out on northeast side of Walmart. They have been talking about this for quite a while. There was a change in management, and application was lost. So at this time, we did fingerprint the manager, Dennis. Most of you met him at the grand opening. So we're moving forward with that, and on that, I'd ask for approval.
Any questions of Chief Myers or staff on this?
Just to clarify, M is carry-out only?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Moved in second. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yay.
That carries 6-0. Thank you. And then item D for separate action is the Clark mosquito management contract. This is Part 4B, which is the only part that we tabled at the May 26th meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? Sorry. No, that's fine. Just got to give the opportunity. Hearing none, go ahead and call the roll.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
That carries 6-0. Thank you. Moving along at a good clip here. Move on to item E, which is professional services agreement with EEI for a waterworks system master plan in the amount of $240,000. And with that, I'll ask Engineer Wallers for his presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a follow-up to a presentation that we made in November 2014. So some of this will be a little bit of a recap, but then we have new information on the actual proposal itself and the master study. So
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pete.
So this is a presentation on water, but I hope you don't find it too dry. So, tonight, I'm going to make the first part of the presentation, and I have asked Jeff Freeman, who heads up our environmental group, to do the second part, the detailed part. So the first part will cover some of the, kind of the regional water planning that you've heard about in the past, and then we get into specifics on Montgomery itself and the actual master study. So just again to recap, water planning kind of restarted back in 2006 when the Regional Water Supply Planning Group got together under executive order from the governor. I was one of the representatives for Metro West along with Mayor Wisner. We spent about 4 years working on developing the Water 2040 plan or 2050 plan. And that was through CMAP, and it covered the 11 county area around Chicago. That was one of the first water plans that was done for the state. They're now trying to fill in the rest of the state with water plans so that all regions of the state are covered. They're running into a little bit of a funding snafu now, but our region and the Mohammed Aquifer region were the two that were done initially, and then there's been some follow-up to those. They're working on several other basins at this time. The Chicagoland area, this map shows the area, the light blue is areas served by Lake Michigan. The green, the darker green is the communities that are supplied with groundwater, and then the sort of light green is the two surface water users, which would be Elgin and Aurora, who get water out of the Fox River. This is a new exhibit that was developed by Illinois State Water Survey to give some indication as to how water is moved from Chicago out to the suburbs. And it's kind of interesting. It's schematic in nature, obviously, but it kind of gives you a flavor for how actually the water gets moved to the suburbs. Think about this, the real cost to move water from Lake Michigan is the pipeline cost, and that's probably the impediment to moving water further out. Because of water conservation and other things that have been done in the Chicago region, there's actually available water from Lake Michigan through the allocation. It is limited by Supreme Court decree, but there is water available to the suburbs. So it's available, but getting it out here generally becomes a little bit of a challenge from a financial standpoint. One other development that did occur recently, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, which does the runs the Lake Michigan allocation program, put their rules out for comment and revision about a year ago. And on behalf of Metro West, we proposed a amendment to that, to the rules that allowed for what's called a partial allocation of Lake Michigan water. And the significance of that was to try to allow communities that are near pipelines to take advantage of using off-peak pumping times or off-peak capacity times, like in the wintertime, to be able to get Lake Michigan water as an alternate source. Now, whether that directly affects us or not remains to be seen, but what it does is it frees up pipeline capacity so that more people can use Lake Michigan water. So it's important, especially if you're on the fringe or if you're like near, let's say you're in West Chicago, right on the fringe of the DuPage Water Commission, you could possibly get a partial allocation easier than in the past. Before, you could not get those allocations unless you completely abandoned your deep wells. And the concern for most of the people that are already in Jawas or using Lake Michigan water is that they won't have the capacity they need in the summer, the high demand months. So anyway, it's a piece of trivia in a way, but it's important in terms of possibly being able to utilize it as another alternative in our area. This just gives an idea of the region and how water is supplied. Primarily, Lake Michigan is the main source of water for the region, for the 11-county region. Obviously, we're served by groundwater. We have a little bit of surface water, again, with the Fox River, Elgin, and Aurora. So when Water 2050 got started, the idea was to put together a water supply management plan that moved towards sustainability. And we started to look at the elements that we have to work with, Lake Michigan, inland waterways, and our deep and shallow aquifers. Well, the deep aquifer, for as long as I can remember, has been the subject of discussion relative to mining. And back in the 70s and 80s, you may recall that there was some significant use of water out of the deep aquifer. This exhibit shows peaked out at about 182 million gallons per day. At the time, they had estimated the sustainable yield to be about 80 million gallons per day, so significantly over the sustainable yield. As a result, water levels in that aquifer have been dropping for a long time. What caused that demand to drop was the moving of Lake Michigan water to the suburbs. So to get those out to DuPage County and to the near west suburbs is what took most of that demand off the deep aquifer and kind of allowed a bit of a resurgence in the water levels. But as we project forward, we're starting to see that mining is again taking place and is going to be a problem. The issue then is we've used one of the silver bullets, which was getting Lake Michigan water out. That may or may not be available now to the further west suburbs that are going to be relying on the deep aquifer. That led to the formation of the regional water supply planning group, led indirectly to the formation of the NWPA, which is the local group that represents groundwater-dependent communities. So in that 11-county area, you know, the Lake Michigan users were kind of the Bigfoot. So we felt like we needed our own organization to manage groundwater and surface water dependent communities, and that's what formed NWPA. Mayor Weisner from Aurora is the chairman of that group. It's comprised of 5 counties and 80 basic communities. It's 5 COGs and 5 counties. And it's a voluntary partnership. It was established in 2010. It's managed by elected officials, and basically it's trying to advocate policies that are good for municipalities and put forward intelligent water use. So it's been, I think, a good sounding board. Illinois State Water Survey has been one of our partners and has continued to work towards better modeling of our area so that you can make better decisions. One of the things that came out of Water 2050 and had been, I guess, known for a long time was the idea that if you can accomplish some conservation, you have an opportunity to extend the time when you would have to expand your water system. And if you can do that, if you can lower that water use, then the time that it takes you to get to match that existing capacity is stretched out, and the amount that you have to invest to reach a future point is lessened as well. So you get really 2 bangs for your buck there. So that's been a theory. It's been theorized by the American Water Works Association for some time. What element was missing was actually case studies where we could analyze what the impact of that conservation was. And Jeff's led 3 recent water master studies for different communities, Algonquin, Elgin, and Huntley. And you can see that by a fairly low reduction in water use, you can see a pretty significant capital savings. And it depends on the community, how they use water, how the community might grow over that period. But you can see in Huntley, if you could achieve a 15% use reduction, they're looking at a $32 million capital savings. So it's can be significant. That's something that we'd like to do here to analyze that, because we feel like that's a way that, you know, we may be able to save some significant capital into the future. Also comes into play the fact that scarcity of water isn't really ever quantified in terms of cost, but if you draw down these deep aquifers and can no longer utilize them, you've kind of used up the easiest water and the cheapest water, and now you're left with likely more expensive options. So we want to protect our resources as long as we can by doing some water conservation. State Water Survey has done a series of groundwater studies for all the counties in our area, Kane, Kendall, McHenry. The latest was the Kendall County study, and obviously a portion of the village is in Kendall County. As they have gone through these studies, they've improved the computer model on every successive study. And it's an impressive model. It covers, as you can see, up into Wisconsin and out to the west. They've added some additional nuances, the Sandwich Fault, and other things that are important to the getting the model where it reads accurately and can project future water use, future water levels accurately. This is a cross-section of the aquifers that we're concerned with, and when we talk about the deep aquifer, we're really talking about 2 formations, the Ansel Formation, which is also called the St. Peter, and then the Ironton-Galesville unit, which is the one where we predominantly get most of our water, and that's about 1,300 feet deep, depending on where we drill it. The modeling that has been done to date has shown that even if we maintain our pumping rates in the region at 2002, that we are going to start to dewater portions of the first deep aquifer, which is the St. Peter or the Ansel. And as you start to dewater, there's some ramifications with that. But as you can see in the corner portion of Kane County where we're at, we're looking at full dewatering as time goes on. So again, it starts to bring into question the issue of sustainability and how long can we use these resources. This is a more recent projection of a similar, out of the similar computer model, and it's the well number 3 model, or well in Montgomery. And what it is, it's historic data, and then it's projections out into the future, depending on the water use that we use, when will we hit the bottom of the Ansel or start to dewater that formation. This is why it's important to talk about water conservation, because if we can extend the life of these resources, it may tell us that we can wait longer to have a larger investment in the community. So, but the other thing I want to point out is that back in the 1900s, the water level in the deep aquifer was like, it was at 700 feet mean sea level. That was basically artesian in Chicago. I mean, water was flowing out of these wells. It's dropped down 700 feet over the last 80 years, and it continues to decline. So we've used up a big part of that aquifer already, and it's not coming back. Its time to recharge is just too long. So, you know, we have to be cognizant of that going forward. This is a schematic was prepared by the Illinois State Water Survey, and it basically indicates what starts to happen when you start to dewater these formations. You start to have issues relative to not only higher energy costs to raise water, but probably the thing that worries us the most would be changes in water quality due to these introducing some oxygen into the formations. You can get compounds created that may be more difficult to remove. There's always the concern that you're going to have some upflow from the lower formations like the Mount Simon into the Arrington-Galesville, and the salinity of the water may go up. So as you dewater, there's some things that can happen, and that's concerning because no matter what alternatives we look at going forward, the deep aquifer is kind of our backup system. So just as an example, in Aurora, they pump out of, or let's take Elgin for example, they pump out of the Fox River for maybe 90% of their water. But when there's low flow conditions, then they switch back and use wells to augment their supply. So you need that backup supply as you go forward. And new users of the river, if they do get a permit to withdraw and treat river water, are going to be limited to times when there's a 7-day, 10-year low flow. They'll be restricted from withdrawing water. So for those period of time, you need to have an alternate supply. So we don't want to use up the deep aquifer, because if we do, then it's going to be difficult for us to have a backup if we start to use surface water. We're not going to prejudge as to what the outcome of our study would be as to what source of water we're going to use, but I'm just trying to illustrate the significance of having that deep aquifer available in the future. We just want to protect it. So this is the steps that I had illustrated back in November. We just think it's time to start to look at our system. We haven't done a full assessment of our system, and it's really been I don't know the exact date, but I think it's been at least 15 years now. We've done partial updates from time to time, so we have. It's not like we haven't been doing updates, but we haven't done a full analysis in quite some time. So I think we're overdue for it. The other thing that we're going to be able to do is take advantage of the work that the State Water Survey has done, and we're going to engage them in doing some site-specific modeling for Montgomery, so we can try to chart our course a little bit more clear. The model that they use is generally regional or sub-regional in nature, but they can look at it a little more specifically, and we've done that for other communities where they actually put in the individual wells and then test it by doing withdrawals into the future. As I said, I mentioned, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, so we're trying to keep an open mind when we look at these things as to what are going to be the best solutions going forward. But the main thing is that we chart a course that we can follow so that we can maintain our economic advantage by having a strong water supply, and we do it as economically as we can going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to get in specifics of the study and what it'll cover, and then we'll both be available for
Okay, thank you, Pete. As Pete stated, my name is Jeff Freeman. I work with Pete at EEI. I've been at EEI for about 18 years now, and I have to say for just about all of that time, I've worked on the Village of Montgomery's waterworks system in some way or another. My recollection of the last time that we did more of a holistic review of the waterworks system was about 97, 98, so it's actually about probably 17, 18 years old, and with the groundwork that Pete laid, it does really seem like a good time to go back and take another look, and you're going to have some opportunity here to talk with some of your neighbors too, and possibly go in with them to develop a longer-term solution. Before we get into the specifics of the study, just want to give the brief background. Many of you probably already know, but just so we're all on the same page here, the village's water system has 9 water wells. All of your source of supply comes from water wells. 4 of those water wells are what we consider shallow, either from the sand and gravel or the shallow bedrock. 5 of them are deep sandstone wells. The formations that Pete was talking about, same formation that many of the communities in northeastern Illinois are pulling from, and the formation that has drawn down quite a bit over time. The village has 3 water treatment plants. The water treatment plant in the center of town, the lime softening water treatment plant, your oldest plant, treats several, or actually all of the shallow wells and a couple deep wells there. And then you have water treatment plants on the east and west side that use ion exchange. All of the water that you provide throughout the community is softened water, and it's very high quality water. You have 6 water storage tanks throughout the community. The 4 elevated, I'm sure you see as you drive around. There are 2 ground storage tanks located at the lime softening water treatment plant. The system, because of the elevation and the topography throughout the village, you have to operate on 3 different pressure zones to be able to hit the pressures that the Illinois Plumbing Code says that you should at a residence or a business or an institution. There's 2 booster pump pressure reducing valve stations to transfer water across those zones. You have another pressure reducing valve station. Right now there's about 177 miles of water main that run underground and transmit that water throughout the community, over 1,600 fire hydrants, and there's a supervisory control and data acquisition system that is linked all together, monitors the activity of that waterworks system, let you guys know who are operating it. They can actually operate the system remotely as well to turn wells on and off as needed or to troubleshoot issues. Getting into the waterworks system master plan, which is meant to be a fluid process. Man, you got much more of a laugh on his. Okay. He's been around a little bit longer.
You guys have the same writer?
The goals of the plan are, starting out here listed, is to develop the plan to meet the water supply, treatment, storage, and distribution, and controls needs. Generally, we're targeting 2040 as the time frame. CMAP, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, has their population projections out to 2040, so it tends to fit kind of nice because we have a number we can work with if the village agrees with it, and then develop water use patterns and go to town on cost estimates, et cetera. Within this document, we also want to evaluate your existing and potential other water supply options. Here we're looking at your sustainable options. What's the most sustainable? What kind of timeframes are we looking at? What are the costs associated with that? Ideally, we want to pick the most cost-effective source for now, but if there's going to be sustainability issues with that, we need to determine the timeframes for when we might want to switch. Evaluate water conservation options, as Pete indicated, to determine how we might be able to do some demand management and ultimately save some costs throughout the community or throughout the time frame of this document. You have a waterworks system model, a computer model that has all of those components in it, the water main, the wells, the storage tanks, the water treatment plants. It's not been updated in a little bit with all the new development that's occurred over time. It seems wise to update that, get all the new water main in there, and then test out the system to see and confirm conveyance throughout the system and identify if there's any issues that we might need to address in the coming years. Once we get the plan together, we'll look at your undeveloped areas and see how the plan, how your waterworks system should be expanded to serve those areas, come up with a phasing and implementation plan. You guys do a great job with your capital improvement program. As part of the waterworks study, you'll see a little bit later, we put the improvements into buckets of time. You can integrate that right into your CIP, and you know generally 5 to 10 years out, and even all the way out to 2040, what would need to be integrated if your water use goes up as projected. Connection fee analysis has been, I think, a little bit since you might have looked at your connection fees, specifically on the water side as development comes back or as it's starting to come back. Probably a good time once we develop all those cost estimates to see how they fit. And then lastly, initiate the sub-regional water supply and treatment discussions with Yorkville and Oswego. And what we're talking about there is the potential for a Fox River water treatment plant that all three communities would participate in some shape or form from a funding perspective and then use throughout. We won't get into the governance issue at this time. It's first the technical, just to see if it's even cost effective or not. If it makes sense for the three communities and you want to take it to a next step, then we would certainly lay out those steps within the master plan. Our overall process truly is meant to be fluid. It's meant to be very collaborative. We have several progress meetings throughout. We do some work, which we'll go through in a second. We come back together, speak with you, get your interaction, and usually it's from a staff level, and certainly anybody else that wants to participate to see how things are going, and then we build on that as we go through the overall process. We have a project initiation meeting and 4 progress review meetings, and as you'll see later, there's actually another, I think, 4 more meetings throughout the process to meet with the City of Aurora as an option. If you so choose to evaluate potentially connecting to them, there's the sub-regional analysis meetings too. I'm going to try to go through this quickly because I think it will make more sense 10, 11 months from now when we come back and present your plan should you want to move forward, but this is the process we're going to follow. The exhibits on the right are from some of those master plans that we've recently done, which we would replicate or essentially make it the same exhibits but for your system. First step is to go through the characterization of the system to evaluate the condition and capacity of all those components so that we have that baseline, do a hydraulic profile, and look at your study area. We'll also summarize your water use. We pick 5 years of time to look at your water use, and we'll pick the last full 5 years is 2010 to 2014. The schematic on the top, just for your reference, is the City of Elgin's Leo Nelson Riverside Water Treatment Plant. They do treat Fox River water there, and then the schematic below that is the Algonquin hydraulic profile. They have even more pressure zones in their community. The water use projections, needs assessment calculations would be done after we establish, the foundation, and that's taking that population out in time and now taking the water demands out in time. Here's population, here's water demand. Once we have the current trends or the business as usual water demand, we can look at water conservation options. Which ones fit right for the Village of Montgomery? They may fit in Algonquin or Elgin or Huntley, but do they fit in Montgomery? And if it's believed that they do, then we can adjust the water use projections out to develop that less resource intensive water use projection. We can do the needs assessment calculations, then determine how many wells do we need over time to meet those demands for both the current trends and the less resource intensive, how much storage do we need to add throughout the community, et cetera. As part of this, we'll also take the opportunity to look at the regulations. How's the community doing with existing regulations, near future and potential future? As much work as we do for the village, I'm pretty confident that all that's going to be good news, but it's good to have it in the report so that we have the completeness of evaluating everything. Sustainable source water assessment, as Pete indicated, the Illinois State Water Survey has done a bunch of work with their modeling throughout Northeast Illinois. They've also looked at the Fox River to determine how much flow is in the Fox River and what capacity might be there to withdraw water for water use. We're proposing to have them part of this project team. They were part of our project team in Elgin and Huntley and did the modeling specific to Montgomery, so we can start talking about, all right, if Montgomery puts a well here, how does it affect things? Does it draw the aquifer down to the same level that you had projected with your other models? Again, with the Fox River, we can evaluate what type of flows are there and what capacity might be for Montgomery, and then in the sub-regional analysis, if you're looking at Montgomery, Yorkville, and Oswego, we can look at that there as well. Evaluate the City of Aurora Waterworks System connection. Again, if you think that that makes sense, we have as part of the study to approach them to see if they might have capacity to serve Montgomery. Certainly, there's a lot of things to consider other than the technical or physical connection that, would be part of the discussion later, but this is just to see if it's cost-effective and technically feasible. Evaluate the connection potential for the Lake Michigan. Pete had shown in the exhibit which one's the closest, what kind of capacity is in that pipeline, and might we be able to extend it to Montgomery. At the end, and I realize this is a little bit hard to read because it has the arrow as a background, but very similar to if the planning department's doing a comprehensive plan, at the end of the project, you have a future land use plan that says, this portion of town we want to target for commercial. Well, the map at the end of this says, in this portion of town, we're going to put a well, or we're going to put an elevated tank, or we're going to need a 16-inch water main to go through that subdivision to serve them and folks farther out. The blue on this particular map is the shale, sand, and gravel deposits that surround the village of Huntley. So you can use that from a land use planning perspective. If that's the case, we might not want to put high-intensity industrial over top of that for potential concerns into the future. We may want to develop areas for infiltration to infiltrate water into that aquifer and someday use it as a source of supply. We'll also look at, as part of the process, potential Fox River intake sites throughout the community, possibly bringing it back to the lime softening treatment plant as a point where it could be treated, and then I mentioned those other two to the storage and distribution. We'll update your waterworks system model as indicated early on as one of those goals. We'll evaluate the strength. We will determine if there's any fire flow conditions anywhere. We'll look at the different scenarios. You have your 3 water treatment plants now. If you switch over to 1 water treatment plant, and now you have one single point where the water's pumping into your system, how does that affect conveyance across that system? We'll use the computer model to give us an idea if there are any issues and then resolve those with the model. At the end, we'll come up with cost estimates. So we develop the plan. We'll put cost to all those wells, if that's the supply you go with, treatment, storage, et cetera. We will do phasing and implementation plans, and this is what I was talking about. We tend to put them in 3 different buckets, 0 to 5 years, 6 to 15, and then greater than 15. We can do that for the current trend scenario. We can do that for the less resource intensive scenario. And at the end of the day, we can compute the cost difference, determine what the savings are. And in Elgin, as Pete had indicated, it was close to $16 million that they were able to save with a nominal amount of water use decrease, some of which would just occur as fixtures get better and more efficient, but some of it's related to how you manage water use across the development of your community too. And then in Huntley, it was over $32 million for them. After that, we would come to you and show you the report, show you the presentation, get your concurrence that it makes sense, takes questions, make revisions as necessary, and you would be able to use that plan moving forward. The sub-regional side of things, which it's just at the end of this discussion because I was on such a roll, is to integrate into the process overall, because we're doing a lot of things for the village of Montgomery. And by the way, we are talking with Yorkville about a very similar study. We'll integrate a lot of those components into the sub-regional discussion, population projections, water use projections. We need to add those together when you add in Yorkville and Oswego, and then start looking at the Fox River water supply intake options and water treatment plant locations, develop cost estimates for that scenario as well. Just a brief run through on schedule, starting in July, ending in April of 2016. Like mentioned, there's 4 progress meetings along the way. The idea is to try to meet, say every other month, and in some cases maybe even twice a month, to keep things going and again, continue to be collaborative throughout the process. With that, then, Pete and myself would be available for any questions.
I had 2 quick questions. You mentioned Yorkville, or that you're talking to them. In other words, have you made a presentation?
We've made very similar presentations to them that PETA has made to you, meaning the global discussion. We did talk to them back in January about a master planning study. They did budget for a master planning study, and we're in the process of submitting a contract to them for their consideration.
How about Oswego?
Oswego, we are not village engineers in Oswego. They have done a level of planning, which was a really broad brush evaluation of their system. I believe that the conclusions of that study, that they really strongly want to look at the Fox River as an option for them. As part of discussions with Yorkville specifically, and I know Montgomery as well, staff, all three communities get together on a project, I think, through CMAP. And I think during some of those meetings, this has come up a little bit as far as the joint sub-regional discussion, and it's our belief that Oswego is interested in participating in that process as well. When we developed the fees for that portion of the project, we divided it in three and only applied 1/3 to your contract with the thought that Yorkville would get 1/3 and Oswego would for the sub-regional portion.
Will your master plan also take into consideration what the locks in McHenry do? Because all I've heard tonight is you say everybody use the Fox River, and then Pete mentioned when the river's low, we go into the wells more, but the whole water of the Fox River is controlled by the locks. If they need water up there for their boats, they just cut the water off down here. So as long as it's consideration, or somebody talks to them up there, or we figure out how they're going to do this in the future, makes a big difference in Fox River water.
Yeah, it's not a simple matter. As you know, the Chain of Lakes is a huge recreational area. There's an obligation by DNR. DNR runs
it.
Dam, and that's the release point for the Chain of Lakes. They have an obligation to maintain certain water levels up there. Interestingly, though, there's not a tremendous amount of storage behind Stratton Dam. So while it seems like they could vary and make the water levels change quite a bit downstream, in reality, it's not really the case. And in the low flow months, the primary element of water in the Fox is actually wastewater discharges. So we go from having, over 50% of the flow in the river is actually wastewater discharge. So it's, essentially we're doing a little bit of water reuse at certain periods of time. That's part of the challenge of evaluating the resource, and why you want to have multiple types of facilities available to you, because you may want to move off of Aurora does that quite often. They'll use it varies, but they may be 70-30, 70% river and 30% well water, most of the time. But in the dead of summer, when water quality is not as good, they may switch over and reverse that and have more demand on their wells. So it's a gaming strategy, but the idea is there's a significant amount of water available, and it's a question of when to utilize it.
Thank you.
One other thing on that is what the Illinois State Water Survey has found is the base flow of the Fox River is actually going up. Not up to the point where it would be noticeable from a flooding perspective, but in general, the base flow is going up. And the reason why is because many of the communities are pulling from that deep aquifer for their water supply. After it passes through the system, goes to a wastewater treatment facility, and ends up in the Fox River. So while it's going up, there's a little bit more capacity that builds over time as other communities are using other sources of supply and discharging into the river.
I was thinking that about stormwater as well. I think a fair portion of our stormwater winds up in the river also.
Certainly.
One of the exhibits showed Elgin and Algonquin saving a significant amount of money.
Correct.
Do they currently do conservation? I mean, we have a conservation plan in place currently, correct?
Our lawn watering ordinance is a significant component of that, and we were one of the first adopters of the NWPA ordinance, so we're on even odd watering. And surprisingly, that has a major impact and does, does help.
So we're already doing one of the components that they're going to do that's going to save them. So they're saving 16 million, we may already be at 5.
Again, that's right, and that's the reason
Okay.
why we need to go through the accounting process to see where we're at, as to what realistically we can expect if we start to do something more. And what would that be? Well, it would be, there's about 13 or 14 different measures that you could look at, and we try to go through each one of those and see which ones make sense, which ones don't, and then assess what's a realistic, if we set a goal, what's realistic, can we actually meet that savings? Or is it just, impossible to do it? And I don't have an example off the top of my head, but that's what we did in Elgin. We went through each one of the elements that would be in a water conservation program and tried to determine, what was a realistic goal over the period to see how much money they could save or how much water they could save.
And then I have another question about the deep aquifer. So, and I'm not a geologist. The deep aquifer runs underneath everywhere. So we can do all kinds of conservation and not drill into the deep aquifers as much. But if South Elgin does, they're still taking the same water that we would be saving. So if they don't, if we're doing the responsible thing and somebody else isn't, it's still going to deplete, correct?
Right. So,
Okay.
as we sit here, the new modeling shows a significant amount of water use in Joliet, for example. The impact from the use in Joliet manifests itself in Kendall County. And so you will see, and I don't know if we don't have any of the, I could bring back that for a later presentation, or I can get you a copy, but you can see the cones of depression. Well, and one of the exhibits early on where the dewatering, there's 2 locations. One is in the Aurora region, and the other is in Joliet. And I can tell you Joliet is the more significant of those areas right now. One thing to keep in mind, though, is water travels pretty slowly through the deep aquifer. It's sandstone, it allows water to go through it, but water moves at a fairly slow rate. So while you are having a lot of people down in the Joliet area, for example, using water and it's influencing us, by the time it gets to our area, it's not quite as significant. So that's a reality. I mean, that people are using the deep aquifer, have been using it. Some people don't have any choice. Oftentimes, self-supplied businesses like Caterpillar, for example, may be using that resource because they don't have maybe any other alternatives. So that's part of looking at this, at our future, is being realistic and recognizing what's going on around us. And yes, in a perfect world, if everybody did conservation, it would be better and it would extend the resource. We can't count on everybody else. We can only count on ourselves. So, what you say is true, but I think the more, and frankly, that's why NWPA was formed, to try to get the word out so that more people understand it. And finally, what's making it, is resonating, is the amount of money you can save. Because at the beginning, when we started talking about water conservation, it was like a bad word. I don't want anybody to tell me that I can't use water. Well, we're not telling you can't use water. We're telling you you can grow your lawn as green as you want, but don't water it every day. That's foolish, because you're going to harm your lawn. And Steve could speak to that probably better than anybody. You want to apply an inch a week, maybe. You can do that in one day. You don't need to water every day. And so there's things that can be done that have little impact on us, really, but there can be a tremendous savings down the line. And it's a cascade effect, because as you build new subdivisions, if we can reduce that size of pipeline going to the west, that's where you start to see those capital savings, extend, because it's a successive thing.
And that's where I was going, was we can do this, and it's great, and we need to come up with an alternative plan, because we can't control what our neighbors are going to do, and if they suck up all the water, we at least need to have an alternate plan for how we're going to address that. That's where I was going with that, was that we need to be responsible for our future.
Is there a flow to the underground water, and if so, in what direction does it typically flow?
There's certainly a flow. I don't know exactly the velocity, but it's very slow. The direction, groundwater flow direction, depends on, in this area, the pumping sources. Back when there wasn't as many pumping or no pumping at all, pre-development, it was pretty much from a high, like in Rockford, where the water levels were highest, and it was flowing to the east towards Lake Michigan and beyond. The deep sandstone aquifers are all across northeastern Illinois. They go up into Wisconsin. In fact, around the Dells, you'll see sandstone outcropping. That's one of the formations, the Ansel St. Peter, actually out west of the San Juan Falls, in this area, even down in Ottawa, you'll see outcropping of the sandstone there. So pre-development, everything to the east. With those pumping sources, generally it's still to the east, but then you get to points where, say in Kane County, where you're actually getting flow from the east to the west, because the water level is creating a cone of depression, and the aquifer just wants to pull water from the easiest spots.
Now I know what that term means. I was puzzled by that.
Okay. I mean, they say that they've done dating of the water from time to time, and I'm not exactly sure how they do it, but the water that you're pulling from these formations can be millions of years old. That's how long it takes for it to recharge into that formation and move to this area. So when you draw it down, it's not like it's coming back tomorrow.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for Pete or Jeff? One comment that I would make, I know that we don't probably mention this enough, but I do want to thank Pete for the work that you do on NWPA, the Northwest Water Planning Alliance. They do, either Mayor Wisner or Pete give an update to the Metro West Board every month. So I know you can imagine how riveting it is, but it is very important. So I certainly appreciate that. And then also when we go down to Springfield, that's one of the meetings that we set up, or that Pete facilitates every time we go down there, is just to inform the state agencies that we are here, we're doing this kind of thing, and keep them up to speed. So I certainly appreciate that on the behalf of the Village of Montgomery and Metro West.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, if there's no other comments on this, I would entertain a motion for approval of the professional service agreement with EEI for our water.
Yep. Justin, is this in the budget? It is in the budget. Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Second.
One more question.
Certainly.
The source of these funds, would it be from the water system?
Yes, it is.
So the property tax is not impacted by our vote tonight?
Correct.
Okay.
If there's no other discussion on that, I'll call the roll.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yay.
Thank you. Carries 6-0. All right, we don't have any items for discussion. Is there any new or unfinished business to come before the board?
I have one item. Excuse me. With the timing of year, I'm going to ask Jeff if we could, because pools and stuff are starting now. I know that we have a slightly different ordinance than we did previously as far as affecting even the little pools. Can we put that information on the website, on the village website? That way people can be informed, please.
Dan? Would you?
Yes, at this time, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Sanders.
We have recently announced and are promoting the use of the Montgomery Police Department as a safe haven for in-person transactions for items such as online exchanges from groups such as Craigslist. The reason for this effort is to prevent victimization and to deter crime for these in-person transactions, which again originate via online entities such as Craigslist. Our efforts are to provide a safe environment and reduce the potential of criminals targeting victims under the ruse of sale transactions. It's an extension of the current services we provide, such as child exchanges in the lobby and the parking lot. The department is video monitored as well as the lobby. So we encourage people to use those resources. 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. If there's larger items, again, the parking lot is always video monitored. And again, we're trying to deter criminal activity. We will not be overseeing the civil transactions. We're simply there to provide a safe haven for them to occur. This is a national trend that we're going to be joining, and other departments have done it. And I know a lot of the trustees and the village mayor have mentioned it before, so thanks for pushing on that. And that's where we're at with that.
It's awesome.
I have one quick thing. Either Dan or Jeff, that last report that was handed out from KenCom on calls, I looked at that and that was completely ridiculous. I would like to see Mr. Ferris, some of the board was here when we switched to ChemCon, others weren't. And I would like to see him come in and explain ChemCon, especially to the new trustees. That report was it missed like 4 or 5 departments. It didn't have Montgomery Fire on it. It didn't have Aurora Township. It didn't have Newark, Little Rock, and yet it said we had 7% of the calls. Well, if half the calls are missing, we don't have 7%. We are probably one of the bigger users behind Oswego and behind Kendall County Police, but at the same time, the figures for 18 for Yorkville is ridiculous. Even 60 for Oswego is ridiculous, because Oswego Fire has at least 250 calls, I think, a month or around that, and Montgomery Fire has probably 150 to 200, Aurora Township 50, and the figures are all, I don't even know why it was put out. I would like to have Mr. Ferris come and say, why are we handing this out if the figures aren't even close? Who's making it up and who's reading it? And I'd like to explain more, because I think we're one of the higher paying ones. We don't have a voice on the board, so it's time to him come to our board and explain, especially the 9/11 calls. The 9/11 system, I can't see working unless they get with Aurora and really discussing. I guess they are in discussion, but they haven't come close to a resolution. And I'd like to see what his comments are about it rather than through notes. So I don't care who contacts him, Jeff, but I'd like to see him here at our next meeting or a meeting after. That's all I got.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Any other items? All right, future meetings. We have a special village board meeting on Wednesday of this week at 5:30 p.m. And then the beautification committee meeting, I was just going to note, the committee of the whole meeting of Tuesday, June 16th has been canceled. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session this evening to discuss an employment of an employee pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C1 to discuss collective negotiating. I can read the whole thing first, but collective negotiating matters pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C2, and then also to discuss litigation where the Village of Montgomery finds itself that such action is probable and imminent pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C11.
So moved.
Second.
Move in second, call the roll, please.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz. Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll call the meeting back to order and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Move second, call the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman. Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
That's right.